talking about 50 years, and then you can talk about it much better than I can. And it was always something that I was fascinated by this publication because, naturally a lot of people talk about it, and they talk about having stacks of it. You can't throw it away if you haven't gone through it. It'll take a year sometimes to get to something, and I'm finding now that I have to be, even though I may want to read every article, I have to really make a selection. I'm getting much too old, and I don't have to, I'm a much slower reader. So, but it is fascinating, and I learn a great deal from it, or at least I think I'm learning. At least it opens the mind. Certainly in the 60s, to me at NYU, it was quite extraordinary, but even more so now. So it's really a project we've been struggling with the past year, and hope to finish it in a month or so.
But the sections we saw, the editing is finished. So it's a definite editing, no?
Yes, I think it is.
Some disagreement.
I think it is. We're sitting there, we're feeling it's the first time an audience like this. We're getting a sense of what is there. Certain words aren't quite, maybe I could tighten here and there and tighten up some of the statements somehow. There's certain voices need special equalization. All of these things, I think maybe it's the action of the events that they're writing about, as opposed to the seeming serenity of the office. And there's a balance of that I haven't really quite got. We haven't quite really gotten finished yet. All of this sort of thing. There's so many elements to deal with in this way.
There's also lots of very interesting archival footage in the film. Who did the research, and how long did you research for that archival footage? Margaret Bonnet?
We've been researching since the beginning because we knew that the archival footage would have to tell a great deal of the story. And always there's an effort to try to find footage that has not been seen so often, and that isn't so known by people that you kind of tune in, okay, there's Vietnam, we know that, and one thing that Marty and David on the films that we've worked on together do so well is they allow you to see something like the Vietnam era with new eyes. And I think that's because they're using it in such a judicious way. And to me, that's the challenge, is finding that footage that will really bring out the emotion for people, because we see so much that we get a little bit inured to the effect of it.
And how many interviewees do you have in this film? David, can you tell us?
No, I really don't know the exact number. We did we did an unusual thing, I would say, on the film, in that the first night that we shot a cocktail party. That was the night before the big town hall event that you see, the reading of Joan Didion and Derek Pinckney. We shot many people in the same setup, in the same room. And that night we did 8 or 9 people, and it worked really well, I thought. So we did it again. So at the New York Public Library, we again interviewed 8 or 9 people. And there was a conference in Oxford that we went to, and again, we interviewed in the same location 8 or 9 people. So it's in, I'd say it's in the range of 38 people, and maybe 20, 22 are in the movie.
Okay. Robert Silvers, you once said the great political issues of power and its abuses have always been natural questions for us, and that's what you are doing since 50 years to take care of these questions. When you look back, do you think that the New York Review was able to change at a certain point attitudes of politicians? Did you ever got the feeling, well, finally they got it? And were there other situations where you thought, well, we were right, but it didn't help? So the influence of your magazine?
Well, I think the great mistake is to have any illusion that you really will change anything. You might hope for it. It may catch, something may catch on in some corner of the world. Some people may be influenced by it, but the great mistake is to think that you're going to necessarily make some difference. The quest of it all must be on getting something that has the quality and the insight that you feel are as adequate as possible, and hope that people will read it. And you mustn't think about these effects. That is a great error, because the concentration must be on the quality of what you do, and not on some intangible effect or tangible effect that you cannot predict and you shouldn't predict. I feel that it's very, I want to say that after that Marty is dealing with, after all, 15,000 articles over 50 years, and I think it's been a work of genius for them to find a line and to find something meaningful in this enormous murk of our stuff. But I do want to, and I don't want to embarrass Michael here, but I do think some of the things he's done that are in and out of the film do touch on what he's tried to do and what we're trying to do. His last article for us was not on New York and not on Occupy Wall Street or on modern psychology, it was on Borges. It was a beautiful appreciation of the work and the ficzione of Borges. And one aspect of that article was Borges's own conflict with the authoritarianism that he sometimes sympathized with in Argentina, and then regretted. And I know no article on Borges that brought out the tension, which was so important to his wild and very imaginative fictions. A second thing about Michael is that in the film we see him reporting on this Occupy Wall Street movement. And I think he wrote the best account of it, because he got in the middle of it, he saw the contradictions of it, he saw the hopes for it, and then something that's not in the film, inevitably you can't do everything, is a judgment he arrived at. And that judgment seemed to me terribly penetrating and important, that there was something in the end lacking. And it was hard to define what was lacking, but it had to do with the ability to limit aims, to find a workable position to go forward. And this was a subtle political, moral, and journalistic judgment. And the final thing I want to say about Michael, since he's here, and I risk embarrassing him, is that he went on to do a piece for us about the more or less secret intelligence division of the New York police. The division which is hardly noticed, but which has very strong support, very strong connections with the intelligence authorities in Washington, which tries to find subversives. And I don't know of any other article on that unit of the New York police, because there aren't meant to be articles on that unit. But Michael was able to find the lawyers, find the people who had been hunted down, and found that in the end, after expenditure of millions, the use of hundreds, there was hardly any results from that unit. And in his article on Borges, in his nuanced, critical judgment about Occupy Wall Street, in his investigative reportage about that counterintelligence unit,